It was around 11 at night and I had just finished working out at the gym. I went to the grocery store to pick up some food for the next couple of days. While at the grocery store, I decided to get $120 cash back, money that I owed my mom, and unbeknownst to me, as I left the grocery store, money that I came so close to losing. Instead of going straight home, I decided to go for a little drive. I just got my car not long ago and the novelty of driving stick hasn't worn off yet. After about a half hour of driving around the city, I decided it's about time to head home. As I pass a gas station on the edge of town, but close to my house, I decide that now's a good time as any to pull in and fuel up. I pull in, and I'm the only one at the gas station. I'm in an industrial business part of town, the edge like I said, so there isn't much around. There's an empty lot that's without light beside the gas station, and I notice an SUV sitting there about 100 to 200 meters away, but I don't think much of it. I get out and start pumping gas when I notice a woman come around the corner and walk straight towards me. As soon as I notice her, a shiver ran down my spine. I instinctively locked my car. She walked towards me quickly, hands in her pockets, staring at me pretty intensely the whole time.
"I got in a fight with my boyfriend and he left me here. Can you give me a ride to my mom's house?"
She said casually in her raspy smoker's voice. Another chill ran down my spine as she repeated the question, word for word almost, in the same raspy voice. I have to pump gas first," I said to her, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. She walked around to the passenger side door. Beside me, fuel port is on the passenger side and grabs onto the door handle.
"Can you unlock your car? I'm cold. I've been here a while."
"I have to pay for the gas," I said. Deciding to cut the gas pumping short, I walked inside and talked to the guy behind the counter. I told him the girl outside was kind of suspicious and I didn't know her. He just kind of shrugged and I could tell he wasn't interested in getting involved, so I walked out. I figured she was high or something, but I would find a way to just get her to leave me alone. As I walk out, the SUV that I had mentioned earlier started up. I watched the driver maneuver himself so he could just drive out the exit. He stopped, engine still rolling. He was still like 100 meters away.
"Can you open the door now? I'm really cold."
So many alarm bells were going off in my head already. First, she just looked sort of sketchy. She was dressed well enough, but her face was pretty rough. She was pretty covered in makeup, but it didn't hide a nasty-looking sore on her lip. Her sunken eyes were dull, bloodshot, and just dead-looking. Second, she didn't seem like a damsel in distress, not at all. She didn't seem upset, and she spoke without much emotion.
"No, that's not my problem. I need to go home,"
I said to her, as firmly as I could.
"Come on, you're driving me home, right?"
"I can't. I have to get home right now." Reaching for my phone, I realized I had left it in the car.
"I'm cold. I've been out here for hours,"
she shouts, pretty angrily for someone who's asking a favor, I thought. Then I noticed her look at the SUV. I started cluing into what was going on and raised my voice a bit.
"That's not my problem."
I'm at the driver's side door now.
"I'm freezing. You said you'd drive me home." "That's not my problem."
I started raising my voice. She started raising hers. We weren't yelling, but it was getting a little heated. We went back and forth like that for a couple of minutes. My mind was racing. I thought about losing my car and about getting stabbed or shot, about getting robbed for the $120 I had in my wallet. I just lost it on her.
"Get the back. You do not know who I am. Get the back right now."
I think I caught her off guard or something because she stepped back right away.
"You better get out of here right now then,"
she said, walking backwards. I was out of fight mode and into flight mode. I watched her until she got a decent distance away, noticing she was walking sort of towards the SUV. I didn't watch for much longer. I hopped in my car and peeled the fuck out of there. I turned into a random subdivision, making sure I wasn't being followed. I called the cops and they said they'd send a car, but there wasn't much that they could do because there was no real crime committed. But I did the right thing, and she was most likely bait for some kind of robbery. I drove home as quick as I could. About 10 years ago, I worked for a short time at a small gas station close by to my house. Both of my kids had started school, and we always needed extra money. I was about 26 or 27 and had not ever really worked anywhere before, but it was fun. We stayed a little busy throughout the day, as there were 3 factories very close by, and would get a lot of our traffic from the employees there, especially at shift change times. One weekday mid-morning, I was working by myself, which was unusual, but my manager, who usually worked days with me, was out sick. No big deal. It was no more than I could handle. There were people in and out all morning, and nothing out of the ordinary was happening, until a transfer truck pulls in and parks to the side of the building. We didn't carry diesel fuel, but it wasn't unusual to have big trucks pull in for drinks, bathroom, or whatever. The driver walks in. Tall guy, not unattractive, but a little creepy looking. He had a huge refillable coffee mug and asked me if there was fresh coffee and if he could fill up his mug. I told him no problem. He fills his mug and comes up to pay and starts chit-chatting. He told me that he had a delivery for one of the factories up the street and asked what would be the best way to get in there, so I told him. No big deal, happens all the time. He then started telling me how he was from Arkansas and that after he dropped his load, he was headed back home for a few days. I was just politely nodding my head. Then he asked me if there was a restroom. I told him yes and pointed to where it was, but did not come out from behind the counter. He starts trying to chat with me again without going to the restroom. He asked me if I was working alone, and that's when all kinds of signals started going off in my head. I told him my coworker had to run an errand and would be back right away. He winds up staying in there for about 20 minutes, trying to small talk, and asked me at least 6 or 7 times where the restroom is. During this time, customers were coming in and out, and when someone would come in, he would walk around the store, kind of behind the shelves. At this point, I'm trying to stay calm and figure out what I need to do to get him the hell out of here. I looked out at the gas pumps and saw a man from one of the factories up the street on a forklift filling it with gas. When he comes in, I was trying to start a conversation and ask him stupid questions to get him to look at my face so I could gesture where creepy guy was standing behind the potato chips. He didn't catch the hint until he walked out of the door and turned back to look at me, and I mouthed to him, "Help me." He turns around and comes back in, and by this time creepy guy had come out from behind the potato chips. Forklift guy asks me if I am okay, and I tell him no. He asks if I needed help, and I say yes. All of this being said very low where creepy guy cannot hear. All of a sudden, forklift guy runs around the chips, slams creepy guy into the Coke cooler, telling him that the lady wants him to leave and to get the fuck out. Creepy guy runs out, jumps into his truck, and hightails it out of there, while forklift guy stays with me until I call the police, and they get there. I make a report, gave my best description I could, called a coworker to come and stay with me, and the police and forklift guy leave. About an hour later, one of the cops come back in to tell me that they caught the guy speeding on the highway leading out of town. He not only had an empty trailer on the back of his truck, he had not been to drop off his load, he didn't even leave in that direction, and no way did he have time to get to the factory, unload, and get back out to where he was pulled over in that amount of time. But he also had a pistol that had been reported stolen in Alabama, and had just been released from prison where he had served 2 years for rape and was wanted in Missouri for not reporting into his probation officer after being released. I have no clue why he was in a transfer truck or what the hell he was doing in small-town Georgia, but he clearly was making his rounds through the Southeast.
A few years back, I was on a road trip by myself. I was driving across about 3 different states to go home and visit my parents and some other family. I had made the trip a couple of times before since I had started living where I was. The drive took a total of about 7 hours, so I would do it all in one day, but it was still a really long drive. On the day that I left, I was able to get out of work a couple of hours early, which was nice. The drive went well for the most part. I stopped for gas a few times, and food as well. At about 9 p.m., I found myself around 2 hours away from my parents' house. My car was running low on gas, and I was running low on energy, so I pulled off the freeway for what would probably be my final stop. After I got off the freeway, I drove down a quieter road for maybe a mile before seeing a gas station. It was a 7-Eleven, and I pulled in and drove up to a pump. The gas station was very quiet, and nobody else was there that I was aware of. After filling my tank, I started walking inside to get an energy drink or something. When I was headed towards the door, I noticed that there was a man kind of standing in a darker area on the side of the building. I went inside and went to the drinks. I found something with some caffeine and then went over and paid for it. Nobody else was inside the store other than the employee. After leaving, I was heading back to my car, which was still at the pump. When I got inside, I cracked open my drink and took a few sips. I was casually looking around and drinking when I noticed the man who had been standing at the side of the building. He was suddenly walking over to me, and the way he was walking was really aggressive. Based on the fact that a random guy who had been standing around the side of a gas station was rushing towards me, I decided to leave. I quickly started up my car and began driving away. When I pulled out, the man was probably within 20 feet of me. I was happy to get out of there, but I noticed the man start running to the back of the parking lot of the gas station where a smaller, old-looking red car had been parked. I had assumed that car was the employee's. I saw the man get in, and I was now driving down off the road, headed back for the freeway. The guy started speeding away, almost recklessly. He caught up with me rather quickly, and I hadn't been driving slow either, but I wasn't going to risk getting a speeding ticket. Now I was really concerned. I had no clue who this guy was. I was not aware of any reason at all for him to follow me. I soon merged back onto the freeway and started driving down it. The guy behind me was right on my tail the entire time. The freeway was pretty quiet, but there were a couple of other cars and trucks here and there. As I drove, I switched lanes a few times. The guy behind me would always copy me and do exactly the same. The following distance that he maintained the whole time was probably like 1 car length or so. It made me really uncomfortable. After driving on the freeway for probably 5 minutes, I decided to take an exit. I exited at the very last second, hoping it would confuse the man. When I did, the guy pulled off right behind me. I slowed down when I got up to a quieter street, and when I came to the stop sign, I thought the guy was going to crash into the back of me. I drove down another quiet road and passed by a gas station and a fast food restaurant that was closed. Now, I was in what looked like a quiet small town with lots of farmland nearby. I really didn't know exactly where I was. I turned at a random road and then turned again at another one a short time later. I didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing. I was just hoping that the guy would stop following me. Maybe if he realized that I knew he was following me and I was just going to keep turning all the time, he would give up. But the guy didn't seem like he wanted to do that. I drove around this random small city for like 10 minutes. The guy kept up behind me the entire time. I was about to turn around and go back to the freeway when I noticed something. I was driving on what appeared to be one of the main roads of the city that I was in. When I was driving down it, I noticed we were coming up on a police station. I saw some of the patrol cars parked in the parking lot, and I decided to pull in. I signaled to turn, and at first, the guy behind me did the same. But as I was pulling in, he suddenly veered around me and sped away, going straight instead. When I got into the parking lot, I saw an officer and figured I would tell him about what had happened. After speaking with him and letting him know, I went back on my way. The rest of the way home, I never saw the guy again. To this day, I don't know why he chose to follow me. I'm a female and a former 7-Eleven employee. I worked there 2 years ago for a span of about 6 months. During that time, I was finishing up my education. I mostly worked overnight shifts there, which were fine with me. Sure, being alone at nights is a little strange sometimes, but hardly anybody would come in. For the most part, it was easy. One night, I was working like any other. I sat behind the counter, going on my phone and listening to music. I had been alone, all by myself, with no customers, for probably an hour. A few people had gotten gas, but none of them came inside. The time was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. Then, I suddenly heard the door opening and saw a guy walking in. I hadn't seen a car pull in, and the gas station is not really at a location where people walk to. He walked in and came up to me at the counter. I said hi to him and asked him how I could help. The man asked me where the beer was, and I pointed to the back of the store where they were. We also had some cases sitting around, which I pointed out as well. The man looked around and then walked to the back of the store. I kept sitting there and then went back on my phone. A few minutes later, the man came back up to me at the counter. This guy was sort of tall and thin, was balding, and looked to be in his 40s or 50s. When he came back to the counter, he was not holding any beer. The guy said to me that he liked my tattoos and pointed to my arms. Then he just kind of stood there. I said thanks and asked if he needed help with something. The guy just stared at me for a second and then kind of wandered out of the store. He seemed a little bit off to me, and after he left, I just went back to minding my own business. I had a coworker coming in at 5 a.m., and I would be getting off at 6. Over the next hour, I only had one other customer come inside and pay for gas. At about 3 a.m., I suddenly noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was coming from the window near the front door. When I looked, I saw the guy who had been inside earlier, who had seemed a little bit off. He was looking inside and pressing his face up against the glass window. The look on his face was rather disturbing and creepy. He was looking straight at me as well. I looked at him and then looked away. I wasn't amused by this. It seemed really weird. When I looked back over again about a minute later, he was still there. I tried to just ignore it, but then he started knocking on the window. This guy had to be crazy or something. I decided to get up and ask the man what he was doing and probably tell him to leave as well. I got out from behind the counter and walked over. I opened up the front door to the building, but as soon as I opened it, the man started sprinting away at what appeared to be full speed. He ran all the way past the road and out of my sight. Oh well, I thought, and went back inside to work, shaking my head. For the next few hours, things were peaceful and went on like normal. At 5, my coworker Alex showed up, and things were really easy then. And at 6, I was off for the day and could finally leave. When I was walking out to my car in the parking lot, I happened to notice the man again. He was standing kind of in the grass between the parking lot and the road. The guy was looking right at me. I hurried up and got inside my car and left. After I left, I called my coworker Alex and let him know about the guy just to be aware. Luckily, the man didn't follow me out of the parking lot when I left or anything like that. Now, fast forward 2 days. I worked one of the 2 days and didn't come across the man or anything strange. But on the second day, I was hanging out with a few friends. There's a diner in town that we hang out at a lot. We're friends with the owner and their family, and my friends and I have been going there for years. I was there, sitting in a booth with 2 other friends. We were just hanging out, talking, and having some food. Out of nowhere, I happened to notice the guy who had been at the gas station. He was sitting by himself on the other side of the diner. The whole place wasn't very big. It had maybe like 10 booths and then seats at the diner. The guy was facing me, and I caught him staring. I told my friends about him and who he was. We weren't really sure what to do though. I felt like the chances of this being a coincidence were really slim. But still, he wasn't bothering me and hadn't come up to me or anything like that, so I decided to just ignore it. The man never tried talking to me or anything. When I left, he didn't follow me outside either. For the next few days, the man was completely absent from my life, and that's the way I would have liked it to stay. But then came the last time that I saw the man. It was a typical work shift, and for 90% of it, everything went fine. I didn't see the guy and had dealt with mostly normal customers. When my coworker Alex came in the early morning like he often did, he let me know that it looked like someone was messing around near my car in the parking lot. I walked over to the window and looked. That same guy was appearing to try and open one of my windows or something. It looked like he had some kind of tool as well. I opened the door and yelled out to him, asking what he was doing. The guy looked at me and then ran off down the street. It was so strange. I went over and looked, but luckily he hadn't broken in, at least not yet. After that though, I never saw the guy again. I only worked at the 7-Eleven for about another month after that. Gas stations in the middle of the night can be a weird place. A few months back, I was driving home from visiting some friends. I didn't time out the drive very well, and I found myself on the road at nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. I still had a ways to go, but I had lots of caffeine and was doing fine. When my car was starting to run out of gas, I decided to stop at the next place. I took an exit when I saw a sign that there would be a 7-Eleven at the next one. They're usually a good gas station, and I go there all the time. When I pulled in, there was another car getting gas and somebody else in the parking lot. I pulled up to one of the pumps at the south side of it, sort of far away from the building. I paid at the pump and then began fueling my car. As I stood near the car, the other person getting gas drove off. This revealed that there was just one guy now, and he was standing near some of the other gas pumps about 20 feet away, but there were no other cars there. About a minute into me fueling my car, I saw the man start to walk over and approach me. He had a beard and wore kind of baggy and dirty clothes. He walked right up to me, which made me a little bit nervous. When he reached me, he asked me if I had a cigarette he could borrow. I told the guy no. I didn't smoke, and even if I did, I certainly wasn't going to give him a cigarette right next to a gas pump. There are literally signs everywhere that say no smoking. The guy stood there looking at me for a moment or two after I had answered him. Then, he turned away and started walking. He walked back over to another pump as I continued to fill my tank, which always takes a long time. Then, out of seemingly nowhere, the man yelled something and punched a gas pump. It made a loud noise. He hit it a few times, which was really disturbing to see. Then, he angrily started walking over towards the convenience store. He got next to it, where they had rocks up against the building. The man proceeded to grab a few rocks in his hands and start throwing them in my direction. He missed badly with the first couple, but he started walking closer. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had no idea why he was doing this. I quickly stopped getting gas and got inside of my car. A rock actually hit my car after I had gotten back inside. I drove off with the man still firing rocks in my direction. When I was out of there and back on the road, I called the police to report him. I was afraid for whoever was working inside the 7-Eleven, or if anybody else would try to get gas there. They let me know that they would have an officer there shortly to check out the situation. I really hoped that nobody was hurt and everything was resolved. The man definitely seemed like he was on some sort of drugs. He certainly was not in his right mind. It's a pretty scary experience that I will never forget, and I hope the man and everybody else are okay. This story happened back when I was younger. I was about 10 or 11 at the time. During that time period, I lived with my parents in a smaller house near the city. We would often walk to a few stores or gas stations to get things. I would go with one of my older siblings a lot, and there were several places within walking distance. This was on July 11th, because on 7-Eleven they used to give out free Slurpees. I'm not sure if they still do or not, but my older sister asked me if I wanted to go with and get one. Of course, I said yes. We walked there down the sidewalk, which took maybe 10 minutes. It was sometime in the afternoon, maybe even the early evening if I remember correct. When we arrived, I went straight for the Slurpees, and my sister did as well. There were a few other people all around inside, and I had to wait for somebody else to get a Slurpee. My sister and I got them, and then my sister went to the back of the store to go look at something else. I went to go see if there were any good snacks that I wanted, so I went in a different aisle. When I was there, a woman started walking down that aisle. She was holding a small dog. As she approached, she noticed me looking at the dog. It was one of those dogs that's extremely small. She asked me if I liked her dog, and I said yes. I thought it was really cute. The woman then asked me if I would watch her dog for a minute while she used the bathroom. I said that I would, and the woman then asked me if I could actually watch it outside. She said that the dog sometimes didn't like to be held by strangers, and she didn't want to get in trouble for walking it around inside. It seemed fine to me, and I said yes. We both then walked outside of the building. The woman started walking over to a small grass area that was next to the 7-Eleven building. The area was really small, but I guess was a good place for the dog to walk around. Before we got there, though, there was this van parked in the last parking space before the grass area. A man was standing in front of it. He suddenly reached out and grabbed me as I was passing by. He held both of my arms, and the woman then told me to get inside of the van. The side door to it was already open. I didn't want to, but the man was much stronger than me and was pushing me in the direction of it. Everything was happening really fast, and I didn't know what to do. It was then that I heard my sister's voice. She was basically yelling and screaming and told them to let me go. This caught the attention of two other people nearby, and they started to look over. The guy finally let me go then. Him and the woman's attention now shifted to trying to get away. I ran back over to my sister, who was just outside the front door of the 7-Eleven, as the man and woman got inside the van and sped off. I remember somebody yelling to call the police as they sped off, and another person yelling to get the license plate number. My sister and I went back inside and waited until the police got there. My parents were called and came down and picked us up after we were done answering questions. It was a really scary experience. Luckily, the man and woman were both located later in the day. I still can't believe that I was almost kidnapped. Every time I think about it, it gives me the creeps.
It was a somewhat nippy autumn night, and I was about halfway into my shift. I was a young man, and I took up any job I really could at the time. In this case, it was a late shift at 7-Eleven. In the United States, 7-Elevens are open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. This meant that someone had to take up that horrid night shift, and that person was me. As much as the job messed up my sleep schedule, it did help me do my coursework during the day, and it did pay a bit better than the normal shifts. I've been told that working in a convenience store is among the most dangerous jobs in the States, and this claim was honestly understandable. Although my city is decently safe, the people who go to 7-Elevens late at night are a lot different than your normal shopper. From what I saw, it was either crazy crackheads higher than a kite, or a bunch of drunken teenagers falling all over the place trying to make another booze run. This was extremely annoying. My coworker Colin and I were largely responsible for kicking these people out. And while it was an inconvenience, it never got truly out of hand or unsafe. This all changed one Thursday night, however. My coworker Colin had some sort of family emergency to take care of, and this resulted in him having to skip a few shifts. This meant that I was in charge of handling the dreaded 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift completely alone. This truly annoyed me. Colin was a really chill guy. His conversations made the hours go by much faster, and without him, I'd just be alone in some dirty store in the middle of the night. Regardless, I received my orders from my manager, and I had to do what I had to do. I arrived at my shift around 5 minutes late as usual, and things were initially going by completely normal. The people that walked in consisted of the usual late night shoppers and people in their pajamas stopping for gas last minute. It seemed like a completely normal weekday night at first. But then, a little past the midnight hour, things got really strange. It was 12:15 at night, and I was sitting on my small chair next to the counter. I had just plugged in my phone into a charger as it was running low on battery from using it all night, and that's when I noticed a car pull up to one of the pumps. It was a large black SUV. The windows in the back were either completely shattered or lazily replaced with cardboard and duct tape. A tall and rather large-built man stepped out in a trench coat and boots. He turned over to the front door of the store and started to calmly approach it. I just kept glancing at my phone, however. Most people walk in, quickly get something, and leave. There was no need for formalities at this hour. "You call this customer service?" the man said in a low, husky voice. It took me a second or two to process that. The people who come in here, especially at this time, aren't exactly expecting award-winning service. "Oh, sorry, sir. Is there anything I can get for you?" The man just laughed. "Oh, kid, there's nothing you can get for me. But there is something you can do." At first, I thought the man was going to ask for some weird sexual favor. Funnily enough, I'd been asked this before while I was on the job. "You see, I'm not a young man like you. My joints, they don't function like they used to. And you see my car over there? Well, it could use a wash and fill." The man's attitude and overall demeanor were really weird. The way the guy was talking was unsettling as it is. I mean, if the guy could walk all the way over here just fine, why couldn't he fill his own gas or wash his own windshield? However, state law says I have to assist any handicapped or impaired customers if they request it. There was no handicapped sticker on the man's car or any sign that he was disabled in any way. But hey, if they request it, I have to help them. "Alright, sir, give me a moment," I replied as I placed my phone to the side. I then turned on the pump from my control panel and started heading towards the car. Look at those youthful muscles work. I love to see it. For whatever reason, I ignored the man's creepiness and continued heading towards the car. The sooner I cleaned his windshield and filled his tank, the sooner he'd be out of there. At least that's what I hoped. As I stepped out of the building, the man seemed to remain in the store. He seemed to be browsing up and down the shelves or something. Whatever. I got to the vehicle, and sure enough, the gas cap was wide open and ready for me. As I was filling the van with gas, I couldn't help but think about what the man said. He seemed honestly fine and was totally capable of putting a nozzle in the gas tank. It made me wonder why I was even out there in the first place. But hell, If I could just get this weirdo out of there, I could get back inside to just messing around with my phone. After about a minute or two, the tank was full, and it was time for me to wash the man's windshield. As I stepped around towards the back of the van, however, I heard the back door shut. As weird as this was, keep in mind the car was really beaten down and old. It's kind of expected for a car like that to make weird noises, especially on a windy night like this one. I quickly pulled out the sponge and squeegee and started to get to work. But as I was cleaning the glass, that's when I felt it. The discomfort, the odd sensation of being watched or stalked. As I turned around, I felt a hand go over my eyes, and soon my mouth. I barely had any time to comprehend what was even happening. 1 second I was cleaning glass, and the next I was being headlocked. I then heard the familiar sound of the front door to the store opening, and heavy footsteps coming my way. Too many thoughts were racing through my head at this moment, but somehow, somewhere, I mustered everything I had and flung myself as back hard as I could. The person holding me down crashed into the gas pump and shrieked in pain. "Damn it, Carl," the tall man said. I rolled back onto my feet and sprinted as hard as I could, my breath getting heavier and heavier every large stride I made. I managed to run across into a neighborhood and dive into the bushes, slowly peeping my head out to see if they were still following me in the van. After the longest 10 or so minutes of my life, my adrenaline died down, and I finally got the courage to step out of the bush. Just as I was about to call my manager and then the cops, it hit me. My phone was still in the store charging. Thankfully, however, a close friend of mine lived in the neighborhood I ran away towards. I knocked on his door and told him everything. Naturally, we called the police. When we went back to the station after the police told us they'd arrived, my manager was already there. Somehow, my manager and the police were as or more surprised than I was. Things like this rarely happen in my city. We always considered it a safe place. The police immediately looked through the CCTV footage as my manager suggested, and what we saw shocked us even more. When I had stepped out to wash and fill the van, the man jumped over the counter and tried to find and disable the security cameras in their footage. He couldn't manage to do this, so we just stepped outside and decided that deleting the footage wasn't worth all the time. We managed to capture the men's faces on video right after I made my escape. We then submitted the footage to the higher level police to see what was happening. It turns out, the men were known human traffickers and were on the run from previous kidnappings. The license plate on the van seemed to be fraudulent or stolen, as the numbers only matched a completely different vehicle on the other side of the state. The investigators believed that the men stopped by my city on the way to somewhere else, as they figured it was a safer area and people wouldn't expect them to be there. I quit my job at 7-Eleven immediately after that. The event scarred me. Every time I stepped into another gas station, I would always get reminded of how I almost got kidnapped. Needless to say, I would never pick up a job like that again.